She was a young immigrant with big dreams.
Cuando fuera grande quería ser policía.
Se hizo la solicitud para hacerse cadete.
And she was just always striving to help people and lend a helping hand.
But instead, she would be at the center of a murder investigation.
El policía nos dijo que se había encontrado un cuerpo.
She's been stabbed dozens of times.
She also suffered horrible burns.
Se nos cerró el mundo.
The investigation uncovers a secret love triangle.
There is an undeniable attraction.
She wanted to be more than friends.
He was absolutely obsessed. The level of jealousy was consuming him.
This is clearly a pretty disturbed person.
But which of the lovers made the fatal choice?
The relationship seemed to be one built on control.
Almost like a puppet in a puppet master.
It's one of those things that kind of makes you go,
November 3rd, 2016. It's a chilly Thursday morning in Oakland, California, a city of 500,000 located just across the bay from San Francisco.
It's considered the blue-collar city compared to San Francisco, but it's probably one of the most diverse cities in California.
This is the home of the Black Panthers. You can always feel that history.
It has a lot of voice, a lot of activism, a lot of outspokenness.
But it also has its share of problems.
It's a good city with a lot of positive things, but if you live here, you're going to witness some violent crimes.
There's a lot of mud out here, isn't it? Yeah. It must have rained a lot last night.
It's a little before noon when a man and his young son are walking through Arroyo Viejo Park.
Arroyo Viejo Park is actually a really beautiful place. It's a very pleasant and peaceful area.
But as they cross a footbridge over the stream that winds through the park, they're met with a horrifying sight.
He saw what appeared to be a body lying in the water.
Do you see that?
It was a young woman, and she was covered in blood.
Shoot, that's a body down there.
Steering his son away from the traumatic scene, the man pulls out his phone and calls 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Yes, we're hiking down the trail. We know there's a dead body down on the bank.
Oakland police arrive within minutes, and they quickly confirm that the woman is dead.
It was very obvious that this was a homicide.
She was stabbed multiple times all over her body.
She'd also suffered horrible burns.
Send major crimes, please.
When homicide detectives arrive, their top priority is identifying the victim.
There was no ID on the body, and her face was badly burned.
The first thing we wanted to do was check with any missing persons. Are there any missing person reports in the previous 72 hours?
They did a quick search and found a possible match.
We came across a missing person by the name of Carla Ramirez.
"21-year-old Carla Ramirez Segoviano and her family emigrated from Mexico when she was a child.
Nosotros somos de Jalisco, de un ranchito.
Mi mamá se vino para acá con mi papá. Ella nos dijo por darnos un futuro mejor.
Mi esposo ya tenía muchos años viniendo. Él cuando se vino a este país, él se vino a trabajar en el campo y él aquí hizo raíces, aquí hizo amigos y pues aquí se quedó. Entonces cuando nos venimos todos, pues llegamos aquí a la ciudad de Oakland.
But adjusting to American life wasn't easy for young Carla.
Ella estaba en tercer grado cuando nos venimos. Fue muy difícil ir a la escuela para ella.
Yo la metí a clases bilingües para que ella no sufriera tanto y no se presionara tanto. Entonces la tuvieron en las clases, como hasta la middle school, hasta que agarrara bien el inglés, sí le costó bastante. Pero ya cuando la agarró, sintió como que tenía alas para volar.
She was the interpreter, translator for her parents.
Siempre acudíamos con ella. Ella hacía todo por todos nosotros. Porque ella era la única que hablaba el inglés en la casa.
Ella fue muy madura en cuanto a ver por su familia.
And Carla's desire to look out for people became a lifelong goal.
Cuando fuera grande quería ser policía.
It was her dream because she liked helping people.
So, to pursue her dream, Carla joined the Alameda County Sheriff's Department's Explorer program while still in high school.
It was basically like an introduction program for young adults who were interested in law enforcement.
We would go over an array of topics, such as how to deal with elements of crime, like domestic violence or robbery. And we would do some physical training.
She was shy at first, but we connected through, just being curious about what we wanted to do in the future, and because we share the same values and we wanted to make our family proud.
I would say she was in the top 5 of the explorers that I had. She just really conducted herself in a very professional manner.
Carla did so well in the program that after graduating high school, she pursued a criminal justice degree at a local community college.
She just wanted to get her degree and join the academy.
And to help pay for her schooling, she also held down a full-time job at a local restaurant.
I'd actually recommend either this.
She was a cashier, and even there, she wanted to help people. Like when people were struggling to find something in the menu.
It was also through the restaurant that Carla became friends with Laura Rogers.
Laura started working there after Carla had started.
I'm so sorry, I did not mean to do that.
She was just always striving to help people and lend a helping hand.
And from that moment, the two became close.
So, here, let me show you. Alrighty, thank you.
They got along together. They worked really well together from what Carla told me. And they used to, just have a good time and kind of push each other through the shift.
But Carla's restaurant job was only a stepping stone to her ultimate goal.
In the fall of 2016, she applied to the Sheriff's Department's cadet program.
You have to go to school, you have to enroll in a certain amount of units in a college, and then we work you part-time at 10 different duty stations within the sheriff's office.
She was doing all these things to ensure that she would have a bright future.
But now, it appears that Carla's future has come to a sudden, violent end.
After finding a young woman's body in the park, detectives have seemingly identified the victim as Carla.
The missing person report matched the height, the weight, the race.
But that's not all.
2 tattoos were also mentioned on the missing person report.
Carla had a dreamcatcher tattoo on her arm.
And so did the body in the park.
21-year-old Carla Ramirez Segoviano was a driven young woman pursuing a career in law enforcement.
She was going to college for a degree in criminal justice and had just applied to the sheriff's office's cadet program.
But after Oakland police respond to the report of a body in Arroyo Viejo Park, it appears that Carla's dreams have come to a tragic end.
Carla had just been reported missing earlier that morning, and the tattoos listed on the report matched the victim.
It becomes clear that Carla Ramirez is the same person who was murdered in the Arroyo Viejo Creek.
And her identity makes this case more personal to detectives.
Carla Ramirez was a volunteer explorer for the Sheriff's Department.
When it comes to somebody who's a law enforcement personnel, they don't stop until they get everybody who was involved.
Detectives quickly begin searching the scene for any potential clues.
We immediately locate some matchsticks with green tips, unburned, almost like somebody dropped them and never picked them up. We also noticed those matchsticks led to the stream, which led to the victim.
Carla's body was halfway in the creek.
She's been stabbed dozens of times.
There were also defensive wounds on her hands, which showed that she tried to fight back.
I got a gas nozzle.
After Carla was dead, it appeared that the killer had set her body on fire.
Someone was attempting to not only kill this individual, but to destroy the evidence.
But the attempt had failed.
Part of her body was in the creek. It was wet and muddy.
So while the fire did cause severe damage to Carla's face, it left her tattoos intact.
Why she died, however, is less clear.
I was pretty sure that this was not a robbery. Robbery is a crime of opportunity. You do it, you get in, you get out. This is something that was planned out over time.
And the way Carla died points to a very personal motive.
Stabbings are usually done by people who have a personal relationship with the victim.
The detectives start by questioning the man who called 911.
But there didn't seem to be anything suspicious. They were just walking, looked over to the stream, and saw something that didn't belong.
But he says it was just a normal day in the park until they found Carla's body.
So, hoping to learn more about Carla, the detectives contact her family.
There's a lot of evidence that the family can give us.
Okay.
Where were they going? Who were they going with? Phone numbers, vehicle. All that is information I need to obtain.
And Detective Sanchez speaks fluent Spanish.
So I make contact with the family, something that a detective never wants to do.
Lo siento, señora, pero
No.
encontramos el cuerpo de su hija, Carla.
No. Esto no puede ser cierto. Ya no quiero que diga nada. No quiero escuchar esto. No.
Todo mi mundo se derrumbó. Le digo, yo no quiero saber ya nada. No me diga nada. Yo quería a mi hija viva. Ya no quiero saber nada.
After giving Carla's family a moment to grieve, Detective Sanchez asks if they can walk him through the events leading up to Carla's disappearance.
I needed to get a timeline. Who was the last person that saw her alive?
Carla's mother says that it was the night before.
She says Carla had been hanging out at home with her cousin, Lisette.
Y entró y me dijo, mamá, voy a ir al cine con Lisette. Y le dije, no, Carla. Le dije, ya es muy tarde para que vayas al cine.
Mamá.
Carla, que no.
Está bien. Solo le llevaré a su casa.
Se dio la vuelta molesta y me dijo, ok, pues ahora al rato llego.
But Carla never came back.
Yo desperté a las 2 de la mañana. Lo primero que veo es la puerta del cuarto y vi que no estaba.
So Carla's mom called her daughter's cell phone.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
No me contestó.
Carla, ¿dónde estás?
So she woke up Carla's sister.
Yo le dije, mándale un mensaje a Lisette a ver dónde están.
But since it was the middle of the night, it took 2 more hours for Lisette to get back to her.
Lisette, ¿dónde están?
Eran como las 4 de la mañana cuando Lisette me regresó la llamada. Y le dije, Lisette, ¿dónde están? Dijo, yo estaba bien dormida.
And she says she hadn't seen Carla in hours.
Dijo, ella solamente me dejó y me dijo que iba con su amiga.
Apparently, Carla had plans to meet up with an old coworker, Laura Rogers.
investigating the murder of 𝕊𝕤 Ramirez Segoviano are trying to trace the 21-year-old's movements in the hours leading up to her death.
According to Carla's cousin, she was planning to meet up with her friend Laura that night.
¿Has visto Carla?
Carla's family had tried to reach Laura before reporting Carla missing.
Her parents picked up the phone.
Pero la hija no estaba. Se había salido.
Could there be a second victim somewhere?
After wrapping up with Carla's family, the detectives issue a bolo for Carla's car.
It's not at the house. It's not at the park. The suspect more than likely took 𝕊𝕤 Ramirez's vehicle after they killed her.
A quick search of the DMV records provides detectives with the make, model, and license plate number.
And we're immediately able to put that license plate into what we call license plate recognition, LPR systems.
LPRs are automated systems that scan license plates for traffic monitoring and enforcement.
So now all law enforcement will be on the lookout for that plate.
With everyone on the lookout for Carla's vehicle, the detectives head to the house where Laura lives with her parents.
Please come in.
I think they're expecting us because they're getting calls from the family of Carla. So they invite us into the house.
Is there any news?
Yes, and I'm afraid it's not good.
Have you heard from Laura?
I told her that 𝕊𝕤 Ramirez is a victim of a killing.
She got home a little while ago. Laura, can you come in here, please?
Laura came out of her room. We spoke. I told Laura, do you know 𝕊𝕤 Ramirez? She said yes. I go, she was found murdered in a park nearby.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Do you mind if we have a moment alone with your daughter?
Detectives asked if they could speak with her alone because oftentimes there are things people would say to a stranger that they wouldn't say to their parents.
She's not in trouble. We just have some questions.
It's okay, honey. I'll be right in there if you need me. Okay? All right.
I told her how important this is, and she agreed to speak to us.
And detectives have a feeling Laura is going to be the key to finding out what happened to Carla.
Laura is somebody that Carla would go see after 11 o'clock in the evening against her family's knowledge. I definitely believe that Laura has information that can help us.
The question is, will Laura be willing to tell detectives what she knows?
One of the first things I asked her is, when was the last time you had contact with 𝕊𝕤 Ramirez?
I don't know. Maybe about 6-7 months ago.
This was totally against the information I was getting, that Carla had visited Laura Rogers the night she went missing.
Where were you last night?
And when the detectives asked Laura where she had been that night, things got even stranger.
She had indicated that she had been with a coworker named Jay, and they had been driving around all night.
So tell us a little bit more about Jay.
Could Laura and Jay have gone to meet up with Carla that night?
Maybe they went to the park to meet and socialize, and something went awry. Something just went sideways.
Or is it possible Laura is lying?
I'm not really sure. I'm sorry.
She couldn't really give us specifics of Jay, couldn't really give us specifics of the vehicle that Jay was driving.
She's being very vague and standoffish. You would think if your close friend was just murdered, you would want to help find out who did it.
But to detectives, it seems Laura has something to hide.
She must know who the killer was and was trying to protect them.
Mom.
Hoping a change of scenery will help Laura open up, they ask her to come down to the station.
It was imperative that we speak to Laura in a different environment, and she agreed to come to the police station.
And as soon as they get her into the interrogation room, Laura breaks down.
It probably became too real at that point.
She starts to cry. She starts to be visibly distraught.
Can I talk to my mom?
Sure.
Detectives believe Laura's request could work to their advantage.
They go get her mother.
I told her, I believe Laura is a vital witness, and we need this information to find the killer of Carla Ramirez. And she may feel more comfortable speaking with you.
They said you wanted to talk to me.
Her mother is very worried, very concerned, and says, "What do you know about this? Do you know the killer?"
Don't tell me you were involved in this. What if I was?
Detectives investigating the murder of Carla Ramirez Segoviano leave her friend Laura Rogers alone in an interrogation room with her mother. Their case takes a surprising turn.
Detectives are listening in and watching through a two-way mirror.
Don't tell me you were involved in this. What if I was?
At that moment in time, I knew that we had a possible accomplice, accessory, if not a principal, in the murder of Carla Ramirez.
The realization means the investigation needs to go in an entirely different direction.
I knocked on the door. I interrupted the mother and Laura speaking.
Mrs. Rogers, will you please step out?
Is my daughter in trouble?
I'm afraid so.
I told the mother, Laura is hiding personal knowledge, if not personal culpability, in the murder.
Then, the detectives officially place Laura under arrest.
What? After reading Laura Rogers her Miranda rights, she did agree to continue speaking to the investigators.
I said, look, what happened to Carla Ramirez?
But put on the spot by detectives, Laura can hardly continue.
She's very emotional and finds it difficult to speak.
I put a piece of paper in front of her and I started asking her questions.
When was the last time you saw Carla?
It may be easier for a person to write their responses because when you speak it, that may be psychologically overwhelming.
What was your relationship with Carla?
So y'all two were close?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that mean more than friends?
As Laura and Carla were spending more and more time together, there was an undeniable attraction growing between them that eventually led to them kissing.
Thanks for giving me a ride.
I don't mind. At all.
All right.
But Laura says she wasn't entirely comfortable with where their relationship was heading.
She was feeling confused and guilty.
Because Laura also has a boyfriend, 23-year-old Curtis Taylor.
She considered it cheating on him.
And eventually, she had broken things off with Carla.
I don't know if I can keep doing this.
What do you mean?
Laura decided to choose Curtis over her feelings that she had for Carla.
But she says that the guilt continued.
Eventually, Laura Rogers told Curtis Taylor that she had kissed Carla.
What?
It didn't mean anything to me, I swear.
Don't lie to me.
When Curtis found out that Laura had kind of had this fling with Carla, his first reaction is to physically hit her.
That occurred at her parents' house, and she suffered a bloody lip.
What is going on in here? Did you hit my daughter?
Her mom heard the commotion, and when she realized what happened, she threw Curtis out.
She also told Laura to break things off with him.
You've got to cut them off.
But Laura defied her parents.
She was seeing him without their knowledge.
But according to Laura, there was no going back to the way things were between them.
Curtis Taylor was obsessed with the fact that Laura and Carla had some type of relationship. So she said, I had to eliminate the past for me and Curtis to continue our relationship.
What does that mean? Eliminating the past.
Laura said that she wanted to eliminate the past by eliminating Carla.
So according to Laura, she lured Carla to the park.
They walked down to the stream like any couple would.
Taking Carla down to this creek bed area, there was this expectation of maybe some romance as well as a surprise gift.
Got me something? I do. Turn around.
When Carla turned and closed her eyes, Laura said that she pulled out a knife and she began plunging the knife into the back of Carla's neck. Laura continued to stab Carla over and over and over again until she was unresponsive.
Then she said she poured gasoline over Carla's body, set her on fire, and ran.
Laura has just confessed to killing Carla Ramirez, stabbing her and burning her.
However, the detectives still suspect there's more to Laura's story.
How did you get the gasoline? How did you get the matches? I knew she didn't do this alone.
And it's not hard for detectives to guess who else might be involved.
Did Curtis have anything at all to do with this?
She literally gets a marker and writes, "He didn't do it."
Segoviano.
Laura says she did it because her boyfriend, Curtis Taylor, was jealous of the brief romance between the two women.
But she claims Curtis had nothing to do with the murder.
What she's telling them, obviously nobody would know unless they're there when it happened. But you also have to wonder, is she telling the truth?
And detectives have their doubts.
Curtis, by Laura's own admission, was the jealous one, and he'd been violent toward her in the past.
So after talking to Laura, detectives bring Curtis in for questioning.
Please take a seat, Mr. Taylor.
We brought Curtis to the interview room. I asked him if he knew Carla Ramirez. He said no.
No.
The detectives know that's a lie.
Laura had already told them that Curtis knew about her romance with Carla.
Yeah, you do. Laura's friend. Oh, her?
Curtis now says that he does know who Carla is, but that he never knew her name.
You hear about what happened to her? Well, yeah.
He said that he was aware of Laura Rogers planning to kill Carla Ramirez.
And you didn't try to stop her?
I thought she was all talk.
He says he was surprised when Laura called him on Wednesday night.
Laura called him earlier that evening and says, we're going to go to the park at Arroyo Vale. Can you go get the gasoline and the matches?
So what'd you do? I got her some gas and matches.
He purchased those at a local auto shop and staged it at a certain location at Arroyo Vale Park where Laura was going to bring Carla.
Then, according to Curtis, he hid in the bushes nearby and waited.
He said he just wanted to stay nearby to see if she would actually do it.
Even then, Curtis says as he watched, he couldn't believe what he was seeing.
Laura's clothing was covered with blood.
Damn, girl, I didn't think you were serious.
Take these.
She says, these are the keys to Carla's vehicle. We have to get rid of it.
Curtis says he then drove them to a nearby motel in Carla's car.
Laura was able to clean herself, change clothes, and then discard the bloody clothing.
Then, They ditched Carla's car in a parking lot of a nearby train station.
Curtis,
Curtis says that he cleaned off the knife and then he handed it to a homeless person, gave it away.
Curtis's statement gives detectives enough to hold him as an accessory to murder.
Curtis was arrested and booked.
News of the arrests and the alleged motive behind the crime take Carla's family by surprise.
Cuando Leo nos dijo que ellas tenían algo que ver, Laura y Carla, yo no lo podía creer.
But some of Carla's closest friends know it was true.
Carla did confide in me that she liked Laura and that she wanted to be more than friends with her.
Que haya sido que tiene, no había derecho para que le quitara la vida.
In the days that follow, the detectives are able to confirm many aspects of Curtis's story.
When the dumpster was searched next to the motel, they found Laura's bloody clothing, just as Curtis had described. And Carla's vehicle was exactly where Curtis said it was at the train station.
Hey, they found Carla's car too. It was there.
Police also gathered surveillance footage from numerous stores in the area around the park.
We have Curtis on video purchasing the gasoline can.
But when the detectives pull Laura and Curtis's cell phone records, his role in the murder appears larger than he initially let on.
In text messages, it's very clear that for months, Curtis Taylor was fixated on this kiss between Carla and Laura.
In fact, he was absolutely obsessed.
The detectives also discover that Laura had 2 phones.
Since her parents disapproved of Curtis, she had a second secret phone that she used to communicate with.
And that is the phone that was being used to communicate with Carla.
It was also the same phone that sent the text that lured Carla to the park.
But it wasn't Laura who sent those texts to Carla.
Based on the location data of the 3 phones, Curtis's phone and Laura's second secret phone were in the same location. But Laura's other phone wasn't.
Carla thought that she had been communicating with Laura, but it was actually Curtis using Laura's other cell phone. Meanwhile, Curtis and Laura had been exchanging texts, making the coordinating plans to murder Carla.
He was the one pulling the strings, the manipulator and the controller.
But it is also clear that Laura was a very willing participant in that plan and wanted that plan to move forward.
Which, as far as the police and prosecutors are concerned, made Curtis and Laura equally guilty of murder.
The DA charges both Laura and Curtis with premeditated murder.
But just as their trial is set to begin, the case takes an unexpected turn.
Laura pleaded guilty with no promises and no plea deal in place.
Laura's taking full responsibility for this murder.
Before Laura Rogers and her boyfriend, Curtis Taylor, are set to go on trial for the murder of Carla Ramirez Segoviano, Laura makes a surprising move.
She pled guilty to all charges, including first-degree murder.
It's very rare for somebody to plead guilty to a first-degree murder and to every single charge on the charging document.
I've seen people who are dead to rights guilty. They'll still take their case to trial because the worst case scenario is they get convicted.
To some, the guilty plea is a victory.
I was very happy that Carla's family would get that closure and that justice from Laura Rogers' plea.
But to others, it only causes problems.
After Laura pleads guilty, it limits certain pieces of evidence that can and cannot be used.
In this case, Laura Rogers' statement was now going to be inadmissible against Curtis Taylor.
The prosecutors suspect that may have been the motive behind Laura's guilty plea.
A part of me wondered if Laura believed that if she pled guilty to the first-degree murder, if that would stop my prosecution of Curtis as well.
It's like, well, is she setting herself up to just take the blame for all of this and try and make him as innocent as possible during trial?
But when Curtis goes to trial on April 12, 2021, the prosecutors maintain that he was just as much to blame for Carla's death as Laura.
To prove it, the prosecutors relied on the text messages between Curtis and Laura.
It became clear between the two of them that they were plotting to kill Carla to eliminate the past transgression between Laura and Carla. And once that past had been eliminated, Laura could be forgiven.
The prosecutors also placed an emphasis on how cell phone tower data proved that it was Curtis who used Laura's secret cell phone to lure Carla to the crime scene.
Those text messages were from the secret phone, but they were from Curtis, because we're able to see that Laura and that phone were not in the same spot.
Prosecutors also detail the horrific nature of the crime.
Evidence actually showed through the coroner's office that Carla was likely still alive when she was being burned due to the soot that was located in her esophagus.
However, what the prosecution can't prove is whether Curtis held the knife, poured the gasoline, or lit the match. But in the end, it doesn't matter.
Under California law, you could be the actual perpetrator in a crime, or you could be an aider and abetter, which means that you knew the intention of the crime and you took actions that helped a crime take place.
He was the person who set everything into motion. Without Curtis, you don't have the murder of Carla.
But when it's the defense's turn, they insist that Curtis never believed Laura would kill Carla.
That makes him not guilty of premeditated murder. And then they placed all the blame squarely on Laura.
Which was convenient because she wasn't there.
But ultimately, Curtis's defense fails to sway the jury.
Curtis was found guilty.
And a few weeks later, Curtis and Laura are both sentenced to 25 years in prison.
She was not sentenced until the same time Curtis Taylor was.
Fue algo ya tranquilizante porque a pesar de que pasaron tantos años, por fin se les dio la sentencia.
And you could tell with Laura, there was a lot of shame, sadness, crying. There was some remorse there.
Not that Laura's remorse made much difference to Carla's family.
Le dije a Laura, ¿cómo es posible que tú no paraste cuando mi hija te suplicaba que no lo hicieran? Porque si Laura tanto haya apreciado la amistad de mi hija, o como ellos dicen que tuvo una relación, ¿por qué no pararon? ¿Por qué le hicieron tanto daño?
And to this day, Carla's friends and family still struggle to make sense of the horrific crime.
I didn't understand why they would drag Carla into it. If they were dealing with their problems,
She was taken down by a darkness that existed inside of Laura and Curtis. It's very sad and tragic.
And Carla was the kind of young woman who would have continued to bring beauty into the world.
Carla was an absolutely amazing person. She had such a bright future ahead of her. She was hardworking. She was helpful to her family.
if Carla was alive today, she would have become a police officer because she had that drive and she had that passion. Everything she set her mind to, she did.
She was going to be an amazing sheriff, and all this was just completely senseless, meaningless, and we lost a beautiful human being.
After being diagnosed with a rare medical condition, Chicagoan Tiffany Jacobs is looking for a man to help her feel normal.
Tiffany just wanted to put the pieces of her life back together again.
But her dreams of romance are shattered when she falls in love with a man who drives her to do the unthinkable.
Floyd had a mind of his own where anything could set him off.
Gotta go! Tiffany was opening herself up to a whole world of trouble.
And later, in Spokane, Washington, from the time she was a child, Jackie Wortham's defiant nature has caused turmoil amongst her small family.
Anything under the sun that you can name, Jackie did it.
And when she joins hands with a lover who adds fuel to her fire, it scorches a malevolent path of domestic destruction.
Edmund was her cheerleader in the worst way.
I don't think Jackie had any second thoughts or concern about what they had done.
There are hundreds of thousands of women in prison at any given time in the U.S. These are the true stories of women who committed heinous crimes in the name of love. For my man. Brought up by a hard-working mother on the streets of Chicago, Illinois, 16-year-old Tiffany Jacobs is mature beyond her years.
And her mom was trying to make ends meet. And so therefore, Tiffany was left to fend for herself an awful lot of the times, especially in the evenings.
Although she has the freedom to do whatever she pleases, the strong-willed sophomore manages to stay out of trouble.
Most kids who were in a situation where they're left at home a lot go to find something to get their minds off of being alone. But in Tiffany's case, he focused on school.
She stayed away from drugs, she stayed away from alcohol, she stayed away from peer pressure. She was pretty much a straight A kind of student.
Despite her sterling academic record, the teen opts to forego college following commencement and enter the job force.
She worked for a bill collecting agency, and she did pretty well there, and she was very well liked by her coworkers.
When a child is left to grow up on their own, they can develop incredibly fast and become a very functioning part of society. But on the flip side, if they don't have the proper influences, they may be at risk to engage in really bad behaviors.
Over the next 4 years, life couldn't be more fulfilling for the now 22-year-old.
She worked hard and she was able to save some money, so much so that she got her own place. In fact, right underneath her mother, who it seems that she had a very good relationship with.
When we can finally get out from under our parents, the tendency is to feel a lot of freedom, to feel that self-empowerment, and therefore to be able to connect with other people, and certainly with people of the opposite sex.
All of Tiffany's hard work seems to be paying off, but now she's looking to play. And after testing the waters, she hooks herself a steady boyfriend in 25-year-old Tony Vincent.
Tony was a friend of a friend, and they started talking and kind of went from there.
He seemed very charming at first, and she fell in love pretty quickly. She loved the fact that he gave her butterflies in her stomach and was off to the dating races.
When we fall in love for the first time, it really does introduce a rush of emotions and feelings that has never been experienced before. And that's why it makes that first love so intoxicating, so intense.
But her dream romance quickly spirals into a nightmare when after only 2 months, Tony's seemingly warm heart turns dark.
All of a sudden, the relationship started getting abusive, physically and mentally, and then she broke it off.
After the relationship with Tony ended, Tiffany took a real hit to her self-esteem and just felt shattered and wanted to put the pieces of her life back together again.
To take her mind off Tony, the new single quickly refocuses on her job, but can't shake the lingering after effects. Though just a few years later, she finds out she has more serious issues to worry about.
Shortly after Tiffany turned 24, her mom and her went out shopping. And out of nowhere, Tiffany started to feel tingling and numbness in her arms.
Are you all right? Sit down, baby. Well, sit down.
Her mom noticed that her words started to be slurred and incoherent. She knew at that moment that something was dreadfully wrong. So Tiffany was rushed to the hospital.
Doctors tell her she's had a stroke, but can't figure out why. That is until a few weeks after being released, when she has 2 more. She's immediately scheduled for surgery to relieve pressure in the veins in her skull.
Tiffany's diagnosis ended up being something called ℧𝕦𝕝𝕝, which is a cerebrovascular condition which blocked arteries that go to your brain.
℧𝕦𝕝𝕝 actually originated in Asia. Primarily, it strikes children, but it can also strike adults too. And because it is so rare, we don't know a lot about this particular disease.
The surgery's a success, but as she begins to recover, Tiffany is a shell of her former self.
Her personality really shifted. She was once a very outgoing person to not being shy, and she kind of wanted the acceptance of other people, particularly men.
Medical problems can be a huge blow to your psyche. It could set you back mentally, emotionally, physically, but also it can change the very fiber of your being, sometimes for the better, but oftentimes for the worse.
To prove her self-worth, Tiffany latches onto any man who shows her attention, which her mother knows is a recipe for disaster.
She decided to apply for guardianship over Tiffany because she saw where things were going. She wanted to protect her daughter as much as she could.
For the next several years, Tiffany lives under her mother's watchful eye in the apartment she rents a floor below.
The ℧𝕦𝕝𝕝 had some cognitive effects on her learning, but Tiffany actually enrolled in a local college and was well on her way to getting her associate's degree.
At this point, she's 29 years old, and things just seem to be trending in the right direction.
Unfortunately, she's lonelier than ever and longs for a loving companion.
When our self-esteem is shattered, what we want is validation. What we want is acceptance. What we want to feel is attractive and feminine.
Human beings require companionship, and when they're hurt, well, that need is magnified. So having someone come into your life when you're in that emotional or physical state is exactly what the doctor ordered.
So while browsing the internet one day, Tiffany decides to check up on ℂ𝕦𝕝, an old boyfriend whom she dated just a few weeks her junior year in high school.
Tiffany was on social media, and Floyd must have popped into her mind, and she decided to do a little reconnaissance and found him and messaged him.
She's always had a special spot in her heart for the former flame, even though their courtship back then was unorthodox.
This wasn't your garden variety high school relationship.
He's actually 9 years older than her, and it liked the fact that she was a younger woman, but the relationship was cut short because he was arrested for an armed robbery.
Luckily for her, Floyd has served his time and promptly returns her note. And it doesn't take long for the pair to meet up and rekindle the feelings they shared more than a decade ago.
Tiffany knew Floyd was trouble, but she didn't seem to care.
And what happens next will blow everyone in the Windy City away.
Tiffany meeting up with Floyd was like opening up Pandora's box. She should have kept shut forever.
In Chicago, Illinois, Tiffany Jacobs reconnects with an ex-high school sweetheart, ℂ𝕦𝕝. And given her recent diagnosis of a rare brain disorder, having a man in her life has finally made her feel whole again.
When we have self-esteem issues, sometimes all it really does take is a kind word, perhaps a nice gesture from someone of the opposite sex in order to make us feel better.
After meeting up for a few dates, Tiffany learns the now 33-year-old is on parole, living in a halfway house and working any odd jobs that come his way.
They got exclusive pretty quickly, even in the face of this knowledge, and they just rocked and rolled.
Would she like to move into my apartment with me?
In fact, Tiffany doesn't hesitate to ask Floyd to secretly move into her apartment, even though they've only been back together a few days.
Tiffany knew that her mom would disapprove of her not only getting involved with an ex-boyfriend, but getting involved with an ex-boyfriend with a criminal record.
And so they tried to keep things on the down low.
For the next 2 weeks, Tiffany and Floyd carry on their clandestine relationship, and Tiffany immediately regrets her decision.
Floyd became controlling pretty quickly.
Do what I say when I say it.
He wanted to tell Tiffany, and did tell Tiffany where to go, what to do at all times. He wanted to be in control.
If Tiffany bucks his authority, Floyd doesn't hesitate to flex his muscles on his girlfriend or her family.
He started threatening her and her mother and telling them if they say anything, they'll have hell to pay.
You're unbelievable.
Feeling trapped, Tiffany believes she has no choice but to stay by Floyd's side, even when things take an ugly twist on a Wednesday evening in May.
At about 9:30 p.m., they were hanging out watching TV, and Floyd suggested they go get something to eat.
Tiffany agrees, and the pair sets out in Floyd's car for some burgers. But just a few blocks away from the eatery, Floyd changes tonight's order, saying he wants to do a job instead.
Try to do a job.
I thought you were done with that life.
Despite her misgivings, Tiffany reluctantly concedes.
Please, baby, I need you.
Floyd gives her a guilt trip and says all this nice stuff to her, and before she knows it, he's willing to participate in an armed robbery.
A person in a very dangerous situation normally should run away. But when we look at their self-esteem, that fear of going outside the comfort zone, then they tend to stay in that situation even though it is not a healthy one for them.
Minutes later, they arrive at the restaurant on West Irving Park Road, where Floyd tells his girlfriend to park in the back and keep the car running.
Before he departed, he grabbed a bag and he started to empty the contents. And what was in the bag was a hoodie, some sunglasses, some fake teeth, and a pistol. At that moment, she realized that this was probably his plan from the get-go.
Following his orders, she waits outside while Floyd enters the fast food joint.
I mean, Tiffany had to be scared to basically participate in a robbery, but at the same time, she wanted to stand by her man and do this for him.
Meanwhile, in the restaurant, Floyd approaches the register, keeping an eye on the only other patron, Martha Osborne, a no-nonsense Chicago native talking on her cell phone.
I just ate. A friend of mine had called me prior, and I was going to return the call.
But before the lifelong pals can exchange pleasantries, Martha realizes something is amiss.
I had stood up to stretch my legs, and I saw a man at the counter with a gun. And I told my friend, call the police.
Hey, you!
Unfortunately, Floyd hears Martha's plea for help and swiftly orders her to the counter.
Let's go!
He points the gun at me and told me to go up front. So I thought I'd better do what he says since he has a gun.
Floyd had forgot to put his sunglasses on, so as she was walking up, she got a very good look at his face. So at that point, when he realized what was happening, he told her to turn around and then put the pistol at her back.
And there's nobody at the counter.
Hey, you! Come here!
So the manager approached the counter, and Floyd held his gun up and pointed at him.
Oh, calm down, sir. Hurry up back there! I don't have
The manager swears he doesn't have the key, claiming it's sitting on a desk in the back room. But Floyd isn't in the mood for excuses.
Give me the money!
He takes his hand and slams that register so hard that it went rocking. And he put the gun in my back. He said, if you don't give me the money, I'm gonna shoot her.
Meanwhile, outside, Floyd's woman is still on pins and needles.
Tiffany was in the car praying that her man would come back before somebody got hurt.
A person in a dangerous situation certainly should run away, but that need for love and acceptance is certainly a powerful motivator.
It's not your money. Just give it to her.
Hurry up!
As the manager continues to stall, Floyd orders Martha back to her seat, demanding she retrieve her purse.
I went to the booth. I was carrying a tote bag with my wallet in it, brought up my wallet to him.
While Floyd pockets Martha's billfold, the manager retrieves the key and hands over whatever cash is in the drawer.
He collected $400 from the register and left the restaurant without anyone getting hurt.
With loot in hand, Floyd makes a beeline for the car Tiffany has waiting, but not before hitting a roadblock.
When Floyd leaves the restaurant, he bumps into a man, and Martha yells, "Hey, this guy just robbed the restaurant."
Unfortunately, the man can only get a quick peek as the car peels out of the parking lot.
But what he did see is that it was a black Lincoln with a very distinctive bumper sticker that had the number 5 on it.
With that information, Martha called the police.
Meanwhile, inside the getaway car, tensions are running high.
Tiffany is frightened, and Floyd is having her race around street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood.
They're now waiting at stop signs and driving through the city, trying to get away.
As Tiffany clutches the wheel, Floyd continues to bark directions. It's a side of her man she knows all too well.
I think he's obviously thinking, this is the reason I broke up with this guy in the first place, and he's back here doing it again. But this time I'm involved.
It's only human nature when you're in a very stressful situation to make the wrong decision, especially if you feel that you have no other choice.
Just run the light. Just run it.
Floyd had her making sporadic turns, left, right, and now they're being trailed by 4 police officers.
The chase goes for miles, stretching from the city's 16th district all the way to the 11th. That's where Floyd orders his girlfriend to pull into a gas station.
Turn left up here. Turn left up here.
And as soon as they pull into a gas station, appears a police car. And so Tiffany panics, at which point the officer fires 2 shots.
And later, in Spokane, Washington, young Jackie Wortham will go to the ends of the earth to emancipate herself from her parents in order to be with her one true love.
Jackie lost it all by hooking up with the wrong man.
But I never dreamt that this could happen.
Following her boyfriend's brazen robbery of a Chicago, Illinois fast food restaurant, Tiffany Jacobs speeds towards an armed officer who's trying desperately to end the dangerous chase.
Tiffany was shot once in the shoulder and once in the chest. She must have been terribly frightened.
Reeling from the barrage, Floyd escapes on foot, leaving his girlfriend high and dry.
She must have been devastated, heartbroken, and just confused. She's shot, she's left holding the bag, and he's gone.
Tiffany musters up the energy to make one last getaway attempt, but due to her injuries, can only make it to the parking lot of another gas station on an adjacent street. There, an armed officer pulls up behind her, and this time, she gets out of the car with her hands up.
They got her down to the ground, tasered her, and then handcuffed her.
Once in custody, Tiffany is charged with first-degree attempted murder, armed robbery with a firearm, aggravated fleeing, and aggravated assault to a government employee.
She was then transported to a local hospital for treatment of gunshot wounds.
The next day, detectives on the hunt for Floyd spot him walking calmly down 5th Avenue, and he's immediately apprehended. He is charged with 2 counts of armed robbery, aggravated fleeing, and unlawful use of a weapon by a felon.
So Floyd brokered a plea deal for 3 counts of armed robbery, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison, concurrently with a 15-year sentence.
Following suit, Tiffany pleads guilty to armed robbery and unlawful restraint.
She got a 12-year sentence. It's like kissing away your freedom. And I don't know why she would let him put her in that kind of position.
Behind bars, Tiffany feels great remorse for her reprehensible actions.
She also wrote a letter to the judge stating about her brain disease and about her strokes she's had and how she was physically unable to resist Floyd.
By having this relationship with Floyd, Tiffany threw it all away. She had a life that was just turning around for her and rekindling with this old connection from the past really ended up burning her.
The way we feel about ourselves can certainly impact the way that we look at life. And if we're in a bad place, if the wrong person comes into our lives during that window, then it will inevitably lead to some sort of disaster, as we've seen in this particular situation.
Tiffany's dreams of finding love crashed and burned when her man stole more than just her heart. Next, Jackie Wortham finds out that following the lead of a bad boy can sever even the strongest family ties. The daughter of common-law Spokane, Washington spouses, once darling Jackie Wortham has hardened into the Queen of Sass, earning her a nickname amongst her loving family.
What do you mean dressed like this?
Jackie was a sweetheart up until she was about 11 or 12, and she started getting this, like who I call Addie, this attitude.
This is the way I dress. Do you have a problem with that?
Jackie was rambunctious. She was lively, outgoing. She was everything. But she was also kind of down. So sometimes you didn't know what you would get from Jackie.
Unfortunately, the girl's volatile behavior only deepens the wedge between her mom and dad, whose relationship is already on the rocks.
And your daughter, what?
Jackie's parents were high school sweethearts. They were together for a long period of time, but they had their arguments.
Where you going?
And Jackie's behavior took a toll on the family.
Seeing her folks at each other's throats sends the tween into an even deeper spiral, which only magnifies when they decide to call it quits.
When children grow up watching their parents fight, they take those memories and then act out some of those same behaviors, resulting in very damaged and dysfunctional relationships of their own.
Following the split, the pair remains civil and decides Jackie should live with her mom. That's when things go from bad to worse.
Things started to go downhill as she got into her teen years because Jackie didn't want to go by the rules that her mom set. She didn't want to do this, she didn't want to do that, she didn't want to have a curfew. She resented her mother.
Jackie ran free while she was living with her mom, so much so that it was a mutual decision that she moved to live with her dad, Danny Wortham.
Fortunately, the plumber loves his daughter more than life itself and is eager for the chance to set her on the straight and narrow.
Dan didn't make a lot of money, but he worked hard and he tried hard to provide for Jackie and himself.
He would take her to movies, he'd take her skating. He liked to do things with her, but she liked to do things alone.
Although Dad wants to give his coming-of-age daughter some freedom, her lack of maturity forces him to keep her on a tight leash.
So Terrence is having a party tonight. You want to go?
Yes, can I go?
Absolutely not.
She wasn't allowed to go off with her friends, and that made her angry too. She wanted to be free, free, free.
Dan wanted to bring structure into Jackie's life, and he was just ready to lay down the law, but also lay the world at her feet.
Little does Dan know his iron fist will push Jackie into another man's arms, setting off a deadly chain of events that no one in her broken family sees coming.
Despite the love that he had for his daughter, the feeling was far from mutual.
This is something happens in the movies, not that something really happens.
Following her parents' breakup, defiant Jackie Wortham has been sent to live with her dad in Spokane, Washington.
When parents separated, the rules that they had in common as far as the household now change. And these separated parents each have their own set of boundaries. And in Jackie's case, was something that she used to her advantage.
But even with help from Jackie's grandmother, keeping the wild child at bay is a tall task.
What are you doing?
We'd get her in school, she'd go out the back door. We had her in counseling, but she never followed through.
She was the typical classic rebellious teen, smoking, drinking, great slipping, lashing out.
The behavior destroys her father emotionally, as he wants nothing but the best for his daughter. Unfortunately, each attempt to set her straight falls on deaf ears, and Jackie continues playing by her own rules.
Jackie would stay away from home multiple nights a week, and Dan would not know where she was.
She started hanging around with people that are older than her. Teenagers that sit around smoking pot. They're loose, they don't go to school, and Jackie was attracted to them. It was fun.
When it comes to teenage hormones, we're talking about explosions, all right? And so when you throw in something like a separation into that mix, well, you certainly are looking at a recipe for disaster.
The teen desperately wants to drop out of school and be emancipated from her father, so she can live life her own way. But Dan is having none of it.
He would file runaway reports when she would not come home.
He went and looked for her throughout the city. He made phone calls. Eventually, he would find her
He'd bring her home and the fights would just continue because she did not want to be there.
She said, "You've only got a year and a half. Just finish your education, and when you're 18, you'll be on your own." But I guess that didn't suffice.
Dan is at a loss as to how to handle Jackie's rebellious behavior and turns to friends and family for solace.
He cried on their shoulders. He was very emotional and he lent on them for support about his issues with Jackie.
Unfortunately, no amount of advice can stop Jackie from acting out. And the real trouble begins when another man enters her unsettled world.
Children quite often think that they know everything. They have this sense of invulnerability, but it's really because they really haven't seen the world and what it really is all about: the good, the bad, and the ugly.
While on one of her famous disappearing acts, Jackie crosses paths with Edmund Washington, an 18-year-old who knows the roads of Spokane like the back of his hand.
Edmund was a handsome guy. He had no criminal record, but he was in the streets all the time, and Jackie was attracted to that.
As the two bond, it's clear they have a lot in common other than physical appeal.
Edmund had been a runaway off and on for several years in his life prior to turning 18.
It's the life Jackie's dying to lead, and she quickly latches on.
They were pretty much inseparable. Wherever he was, she wanted to be. So when she ran away, she wasn't just going out doing random things. She was going to be with Edmund.
And what better way to push Dad's buttons than to tell him she's having her booze baby?
She played that ploy a couple of times, but it didn't fly. "I'm pregnant, feel sorry for me," because she was always the little drama queen.
Jackie thought that her father would be very upset about her being pregnant.
Though instead of being angry, Dan offers his love and support, as he's done her entire life.
It's your decision, Jackie, dude. I support you.
He says, "If you want to keep this baby, we keep this baby, and no one will ever take him away from you. But if you don't want this baby, and you really want an abortion, I will back that too."
Faking a pregnancy is very serious, and what I tend to see, my opinion, is that people who do that, it certainly is a cry for help. It certainly is an overblown bid to get attention.
No.
Irate that she's lost the upper hand, Jackie storms out of the house and out of her father's life, threatening to run away with her true love once and for all. Only this time, the road to liberation leads straight to a dead end.
Dan had no idea what he was in for.
He was just a pawn in a queen's chassis, and nobody was.
In Spokane, Washington, 16-year-old Jackie Wortham has found the ultimate way to free herself from her dad's control. She plans to disappear for good with her boyfriend, Edmund Washington, a man she'd do anything to keep.
Desperate people do very desperate things sometimes. And if there's someone there who's cheering them on, then the chances of doing something really wrong increases exponentially.
After just 2 months of dating, the couple decides to pack their belongings. And when a friend lends them a vehicle, they hit the highway.
They have no destination in mind, but they're swindling gas money, whatever they can to make this trip happen.
Although it's not unusual for Jackie to be gone for days on end, this time her father is worried, given the severity of their most recent spat.
And Dan, once again, filed a police report. He doesn't know what to do but to keep looking and to just remain prayerful and hope that she comes back home.
She ran away again and again and again. Well, now it was full-blown. Danny was at his wit's end.
Nearly 2 weeks pass with no sign of his daughter, so he decides to take a drastic measure.
Jackie's dad had filled out a youth at-risk petition. In Washington State, if you have a youth who is out of control and you can't get under control, there are certain things you can ask the court to court order your child to participate in, to include counseling, drug testing, curfews, and so on.
When Dan texts his daughter about the pending legal action, it sparks her to return home. And when she walks through the door later that day, her entire family is waiting with a final, desperate plea.
They had an intervention with Jackie,
We're all here because we love
talking
you.
about how they were affecting their lives and how she was damaging her own life and the issues it was going to present.
We couldn't let her get away with just anything. And that's where Jackie snapped.
I can't believe you are all doing this to me. I'm not doing anything wrong.
The teen is furious that she's being bombarded and refuses help. She orders everyone out while she catches her breath.
She was very angry, so much so that it was a mutual decision that Jackie would stay with the grandma and grandpa overnight and then come back to Dan's house the next day.
And when she wakes up the next morning, it appears her personal storm has blown over.
She was just perfectly amiable, really nice and sweet. And then she called her father, and she says that he's going to come get her at lunchtime. And I said, why? And she said, because I'm going to go back to the house.
Lorene isn't sure leaving Jackie home alone is a good idea, given her penchant for running away. But she's not one to second-guess her son's parenting skills.
I felt that strongly about it. Danny's her father, and I never went against him. He's her daddy. He's a good one. So if he thought she could be trusted, so be it.
On his lunch break, Dan arrives to pick his daughter up and they drive home, exchanging only a few apathetic words.
The plan was for her to be brought to Dan's house, and then he would come home from work and he and Jackie could talk some more.
After getting her settled in, Dan heads back to the job, confident they'll work it out. He has no idea that Jackie won't be alone when he returns, and she's hatching a plan to emancipate herself once and for all.
I thought that she was just running away again. I never dreamed that this could happen.
While Dan finishes his hours on call, Jackie sits on the couch, plotting her final exit strategy.
I think Jackie knew that her father was never going to stop his crusade of trying to save his baby girl. And she probably felt that the only way that she could live her life the way that she wanted was for her dad not to be in the picture anymore.
It's around 3 o'clock when Jackie phones her boyfriend and tells him to come to the house. As the two talk, Edmund agrees that Dan is the only thing standing in the way of their happiness and something drastic has to be done.
I think he was her cheerleader in the worst way. He got out from behind his parents and he wanted the same for Jackie. And I think that he encouraged her to live the life that she wanted to live by any means necessary.
They finalized their plans where Edmund would hide when Dan returned home and what Jackie would be doing to distract him so his back would be to where Edmund came out of hiding to attack him.
When it comes to love, our sense of right or wrong can become blurred or jaded, and it becomes especially dangerous when we have anger issues.
To prepare for the ambush, evidence shows the pair rummages through the house and finds several items with which to arm themselves.
They find a sword, Jackie's knife that Dan gave her for protection. They got a baseball bat, tools to really get at someone.
4 hours later, Dan pulls into the driveway with a peace offering, hoping it will butter up his daughter.
He was going to pick up a pizza for him and Jackie and bring it home to his little girl.
Hi, Daddy.
According to police, that's when Edmund pops out from the hallway and their plan is put into motion.
Edmund, it ends tonight.
Fuming, Dan gives Edmund a shove. That's when he reveals the knife he'd been hiding and lunges at the dutiful dad.
Edmund slashes Dan twice in the face and stabs him in the neck.
Dan immediately went down, and Edmund stabbed him multiple times in the legs and pelvis area with that knife, disabling his legs.
My legs! Stop, please!
Just then, out of the corner of his wounded eye, Dan notices his daughter enter the fray and raise a baseball bat over her head. Is she going to save him from Edmund's vicious assault, or put the nail in his coffin?
At that point, Dan could only pray that good would triumph over evil.
Jackie! Help me!
Dan Wortham fights for his life after being viciously ambushed by his daughter and her boyfriend in his Spokane, Washington home. His only hope is that Jackie will step in to save him.
As Edmund and Dan struggled, Jackie came at them with the bat. She hits her dad on his back. Edmund then jumps in with the sword and he starts slashing him.
In my opinion, Jackie liked seeing her dad suffer. It was like retribution, or I'm enjoying this now.
In my opinion, when it comes to attacking your own father, the person who gave you life, it takes a certain kind of detachment, and it may be some sort of a personality disorder to do something so monstrous.
Within minutes, Dan's body goes limp, and the couple moves on to phase 2 of their plan.
Jackie and Edmund disturb the house, throw things around, make it look like there was burglary or a giant fight inside the house.
After staging the scene, they add the ultimate insult to injury.
They kill her father. He's laying there, and they go enjoy the pizza that he brought in as he lay dead on the floor.
When they finish, Edmund turns to Jackie and tells her they need to get out of the house.
Jackie and Edmund pack a suitcase with a bunch of Jackie's belongings. They take Dan's car keys and leave.
The pair quickly exits through the backyard and heads toward a vacant house where local outcasts have been known to hang out.
It's right above Spokane, and it was a known drug house.
2 days later, on Easter Sunday, Dan's mom and stepfather are worried sick.
I was terrified. I kept telling my husband, there's something wrong. There's something wrong.
Dan's parents were looking to hear some type of update from his talk with Jackie that went on that Friday night.
I was very, very upset. That's not like my son. We're very tight. When I call him, he answers.
Fearing the worst, they decide to make the 10-mile trek over to his place.
They noticed that his 2 vehicles were outside of the home. So they went, knocked on the door, but no one was answering.
It was pure panic. And that's when I called the police.
Within minutes, responders from the Spokane Police Department arrive on the scene. They too receive no answer when they bang on the door.
Mr. Wortham, police.
Patrol officers found the house locked up and secured. They forced entry to the house and were searching the house when they found blood.
And as they slowly make their way through the home, they find the source.
They saw blood splatter on the wall, lots of blood that collected on Dan, his lower part of his body. The scene was not pretty.
My impression was that the overkill on Dan made me very concerned that Jackie was involved in what happened.
I just broke. I snapped. And I went into more pain than I've ever felt in my life. I felt as if I was dying, too.
In a desperate pursuit for answers, police fan out and question neighbors in the surrounding area. That's when they get their first lead.
A friend gave them a tip that she could possibly be in the vacant home that's in the area, and they should try to look there.
They went there, and there she was, sitting there with Edmund in a bed, leaning up against the wall, Indian style, shoes on, everything.
And I looked down, and I could see blood on Jackie's shoes and on Edmund's shoes. At that point, Jackie started whispering to me that she wanted to talk to me and tell me what happened, and so we transported them to the detective's office where we could interview them.
Back at the station, the pair is questioned separately, and Jackie is more than willing to talk.
Jackie changed her story multiple times.
I'm pregnant.
At one point, Jackie told us that she was pregnant with Edmund's child and that her dad was going to force her to get an abortion, and she did not want to do that, and she wanted Edmund's help to save her child's life.
But when they present her with the mountain of evidence recovered from the crime scene, the teen quickly caves.
She showed no remorse, and she just confessed to her and Edmund cooking up a plan to kill Dan.
Remorse is where you have some sort of guilt or you feel badly or sorry for something that you've done which was shameful. But the interesting thing is that if you don't believe what you did was wrong, then it's almost impossible to feel that remorse.
For their crimes, 18-year-old Edmund is charged with first-degree murder. And despite being only 16, Jackie is charged as an adult with the same.
Jackie and Edmund put a lot of thought into how they were going to kill Dan, laying out their weapons and distracting him. But they didn't put hardly any thought, if any, into how they were not going to get caught for it.
I mean, I've forgiven everybody all my life for everything they've ever done to me. I say, yeah, no problem. Not this one. And I don't forgive her.
After 2 years of legal holdups, Jackie eventually pleads guilty to the charge and is sentenced to 22 years in prison. Her boyfriend promptly follows suit and is given the same sentence.
Toward the end, Edmund began to grasp the reality of what had happened and what was going to happen. I think he was more concerned about what he had done to his life than what happened to Dan.
Jackie has apologized for her heinous actions, though some continue to question her genuineness.
She's shed a few tears, but people are skeptical of whether the tears are real or if they're just for show.
Devastated my entire family. It was like tsunami, just slow. We have fought to come back, all of us. But there's an emptiness that's inside me that I can almost not bear.
Jackie lost her life and her future when she killed her father and brought Edmund into her life. She lost a loving dad, and she's going to sit in prison until she's almost 40.
They say love is blind. And for some folks, it's true. You see past your partner's faults and give your whole heart to them unconditionally. To those on the outside, it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't have to. In your mind, you found the one you're destined to be with forever. But what happens when you're so blinded by love, you can't see that your perfect romance is anything but? Would you have the strength to open your eyes? Or would you be willing to keep living in the dark, even if the man of your dreams was a monster? January 6, 2006. It's a quiet night in Richmond, Virginia. Most residents are settling in for the night. But over on the south side of town, police anxiously arrive at the home of Perciel and Mary Tucker.
A female called 911 to check on her welfare. She said something that may have been harmed. It may be something going on.
The caller, Lillian Pauley, had reason to believe that something terrible had happened to her daughter's friend, 21-year-old Ashley Baskerville.
I tried to call her and the phone just ring, and nobody never picked up.
Officers enter the home through the unlocked front door.
The first thing we could see was one individual laying in the floor of the living room.
Detectives presume the man is Ashley's stepfather, Perciel, but they never expected to find him or anyone else like this.
Mr. Tucker was bound with what looked like duct tape. He had some plastic sheathing around his face.
He was covered in blood, stabbed multiple times, slashed multiple times.
But the dead body of Perciel Tucker isn't the only horrific discovery officers make that night.
We discovered Miss Tucker laying on her back.
Like her husband, Mary Tucker's hands and feet are bound. Her head is wrapped in plastic.
She's also stabbed, slashed, assaulted.
This is one of the most heinous crimes we've seen in a house.
Ashley's parents have been slaughtered in her childhood home. And now there are more questions than answers. But most importantly, where's Ashley Baskerville? The answer to that question would unearth a tragic tale of a young woman who was looking for love in all the wrong places. 21-year-old Ashley Baskerville grew up in a loving home with her mother and stepfather, Mary and Perciel.
Her mom, Mary, was kind of the go-to-church every Sunday kind of woman. Perciel, her stepfather, who basically raised her, was a retired guy, just an all-American kind of guy.
Ashley had a great foundation with a stable mom and stepfather in the home.
With devoted parents who showered her with love and affection, Ashley's life was full of promise.
She always smiled. She was just fun to be around.
She was real sweet and loving.
But despite her strong family values, in high school, Ashley began to act out.
They really started struggling with her and behavioral issues. She was running with a bad crowd.
She always was a follower. Anything anybody tell her, she believed it, she'd go along with it. She just was that way. She started sneaking out the house and stuff.
Eventually, Ashley's actions landed her in hot water.
They was out there stealing cars and stuff, and they thought it was a joke and everything.
She started dabbling with drugs. She did get into trouble with the law.
In October of 2002, Ashley was arrested and locked up on a federal drug possession charge.
She was sent to serve a 30-month sentence at a federal prison in Connecticut.
Life in the federal pen was a wake-up call for Ashley. At 21 years old, she decided to leave her wild teenage ways behind and left prison with a plan.
She wanted a fresh start.
Ashley had good intention of doing better. She called me and said, "Auntie, I'm planning on going to nursing school."
She was trying to get her life together. She really wanted to make something of herself.
But before long, Ashley's plan started to unravel. It started when her friend Ray Dandridge introduced her to his handsome uncle, Ricky Gray.
At some point, she began dating Ricky Gray.
I think the two of them saw something in each other. They recognized they filled a void for each other, and they were kindred spirits.
The only problem? Like Ashley, Ricky had a criminal record.
Ricky Gray served a prison sentence for robbery and firearms charges.
But unlike Ashley, Ricky and Ray had no plans to start walking the straight and narrow.
Ricky and Ray, they committed some crimes together and were both convicted and served time for those.
Some people opined that Ricky was the leader, and when Ray was on the street without Ricky, he didn't get in trouble. But when he was with Ricky, he got in trouble.
In an effort to introduce a more positive influence into Ricky and Ray's lives, Ashley hooked Ray up with her close friend, LaToya Pauly.
Ashley had called my daughter, LaToya, and asked her, "I got two friends of mine that want to take us out."
They've become a clique. They formed their own little group.
As the two couples bonded, Ashley became all-consumed by Ricky.
Ricky Gray, he was at least 6 foot tall, very muscular, a big guy. He had a certain charm to him.
They were very close-knit, around each other almost 24 hours a day.
Just a month into the relationship, Ashley and Ricky started making plans and talking about till death do us part. Ashley was head over heels and hoped she'd found a love just like her parents, who'd been together for decades. But life had other plans for Ashley Baskerville. On January 6, 2006, police discovered the bound and battered bodies of her mom and stepdad inside their home in South Richmond. They are still looking for the couple's daughter, Ashley, when an officer spots something down a dark hallway.
We went to the far back of the house. Working homicide, you get used to seeing the bodies. But this was shocking.
January 6, 2006. Richmond police have discovered Perciel and Mary Tucker viciously murdered, bound, stabbed, and suffocated in their own home. Police are still searching for the couple's daughter, Ashley.
In the far back of the house, laying on the bed in the bedroom, I see another body on the bed. We found Ashley.
Ashley has suffered the same fate as her parents.
You can see the same type of scenario where she's bound, plastic bag that was over her head.
As detectives process the scene inside, a crowd begins to gather outside the home.
We were hearing a lot about just how awful the crime scene was. like nothing they had ever seen before. To have this whole family slain in their home, it was horrific. Just awful beyond words.
My older sister called me, and she said, they found Mary now. And when she told me that, I threw the phone on the floor. It was very, very, very hard.
My heart just dropped out of my body. I just could not believe it.
Nobody knew exactly what was going on, so it was scary. It was the type of crime that people are afraid of.
Everything as far as emotions, I have to put in the back of my mind, and you basically kick into, I've got to figure out who did this and why.
Detectives are quick to ascertain that one of the Tuckers' vehicles is missing.
So I entered the vehicle in the NCIC visa and stolen and taken in triple homicide.
If the vehicle is stopped by law enforcement, the system will alert officers to its connection in the grisly crime. Meanwhile, detectives search the residence for signs of a possible motive.
We believe it's more of a robbery going very bad.
3 people were found bound, duct tape, plastic bags, throat slit inside this home.
We were scared out of our wits because we knew that this was a different type of crime. This was simply evil.
Complicating matters is the fact that detectives can find no evidence of a forced entry.
It was the eerie feeling of the unknown. You didn't know, really. Okay, was it random? Was it not random?
There was a lot of panic and unrest in the community because we knew that the people who had killed this family were still at large.
Investigators need to learn more about Ashley and her parents to move forward. The next morning, detectives reconvene at the medical examiner's office, hoping the autopsies of their 3 victims will uncover more clues about their gruesome deaths.
The parents had plastic or saran wrap around their heads and faces. They were suffocating while they were laying there. And the same thing happened with Ashley, where she was also wrapped in this plastic around her head.
The medical examiner estimated that it took about 5 to 7 minutes for them to actually die from the suffocation.
The coroner determines that the official cause of death for both of Ashley's parents is asphyxiation. But she also notes Perciel and Mary each suffered dozens of superficial stab wounds.
I think it takes a very different type of killer to shoot someone from afar versus killing them in a very meticulous and hostile sort of way where the victim doesn't die right away.
Due to the personal nature of the violence, they thought it was someone who had a personal grudge.
But what the coroner finds next takes the case in a totally unexpected direction.
When Ashley Baskerville's body was found, she had a wedding ring.
She was wearing it around her neck, so obviously it meant something to her.
Detectives know Ashley isn't married. So whose ring is it? As the case unfolds, the ring would connect Ashley Baskerville to another slain family.
It was big in the beginning with 3 people murdered, but now it was getting really big.
And soon, detectives would uncover the truth about the beautiful 21-year-old.
It was just unbelievable, unbelievable.
Police in Richmond, Virginia are investigating the brutal triple homicide of Ashley Baskerville and her parents. As the medical examiner finishes up with Ashley's autopsy, she makes a surprising discovery.
Ashley Baskerville was wearing a wedding ring around her neck.
But this isn't just any wedding ring. It contains the initials BH, the initials of another recent murder victim, Brian Harvey, whose wedding ring was missing when his body was discovered. Brian and his wife, Catherine, were well known around Richmond.
This was a family that was very well liked and admired in the community, just a light in Richmond.
They enjoyed a lot of respect and affection in their world. They were convivial, the kind of people you wanted to be around.
Which made the details of the Harveys' murder all the more shocking.
It was the annual New Year's Day party at the Harvey house.
One of the Harvey's friends who was attending the party showed up about 20 minutes before it was to begin.
But he kind of felt like something was off. And when he went to go in, that's when he smelled smoke and called 911.
Firefighters arrive on scene as the Harvey's friend watches in horror. They quickly make their way to the basement, where the fire seems to have originated.
When the firefighters got down there, conditions were such that they could really see much. They found people. It wasn't until then they realized that it was something much worse.
This family of 4 had been killed.
They had been beaten up, choked, and left for death.
When the perpetrator left the Harvey home, they stole 2 laptop computers and Brian Harvey's wedding band.
As violent as it was, how do you make sense of this?
Less than a week later, the horrific murder of the Harvey family of 4 is compounded by the triple homicide of Ashley Baskerville and her parents, and the stolen wedding ring that now binds the 2 cases together.
So basically, you had a violent home invasion and the murder of 7 people, all within the first 6 days of 2006.
In an effort to understand the connection between Ashley Baskerville and Brian Harvey, investigators turned to Lillian Pauley, who'd initially called police the night Ashley and her parents were discovered.
My daughter, Toya, met Ashley when they were teens.
Lillian says the girls lost touch for several years, but reconnected just weeks before Ashley's death.
Ashley didn't have a wide support system of friends, and they became very close very quickly.
It wasn't long after Toya and Ashley got together when Ashley stayed at my house.
Ashley arrived on New Year's Day, and she wasn't alone. She brought her boyfriend, Ricky, and his nephew, Ray. Lillian explains she wasn't thrilled with her unexpected house guests, but the 2 young men seemed eager to win her over.
They came out and helped me with my bags, and, oh, you're a nice lady. You shouldn't be toting no bags in the house.
They gave her a plate of cookies, chocolate chip cookies.
I said, where did you get them from? My daughter said, they said they brought them from somebody off the street. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was, you know.
Lillian tells investigators that she tried to be hospitable.
Toya had told Ricky that, my mama makes some good sweet potato pies. I'm gonna get her to make you one. I fixed the sweet potato pie and took it out the oven. And Ricky said, put it back in, it ain't brown enough.
It was very disrespectful, cursing, very demanding, that type of thing.
I looked at him like he was crazy and left it right there. Went upstairs in my room.
Lillian says the incident with the sweet potato pie was nothing compared to the conversation she later overheard between Ricky and Ray.
They said they wanted to ride around to see if they could find some people to rob.
What was on their mind was robbery, and that's how they were going to make their living.
Lillian says her daughter LaToya seemed to want no part of the plan, but Ashley, well, that was a different story.
Most people would run from that situation. I actually didn't.
Lillian decided she had to know what else the trio was hiding.
Ricky and Ray and Ashley, they had this big duffel bag. And I looked in the bag, and the only thing I saw was hammers and drills and tools, stuff like that.
This is a robbery kit. That's what we're dealing with here. This is something they do on a regular basis, rob people.
I stayed in my room, and I kept telling Toya, you got to get these people out here. I don't feel comfortable in here with them in here. She told me, you can't be scared. You can't act like you know what's going on. We can't call the police.
They're basically walking on eggshells the entire time these guys are in the home.
Lillian says her daughter kept up the illusion to her boyfriend Ray that nothing was wrong.
By gaining Ray's trust, that bought them time. And I believe to this day that if it wasn't for LaToya talking to Ray, acting as a friend, just, giving him a shoulder to lean on, I believe that he kept Ricky up off from doing something terrible to them.
For 6 days, we was in the survival mode and trying to keep them happy enough to get them out.
Lillian tells investigators that a week after their arrival, Ashley and the men finally left.
They was trying to get Toya to go with them. And I thought, Toya, you ain't going nowhere with them, And she didn't. All three of them left together, Ricky, Ray, and Ashley.
Lillian's statement provides police with their first real suspects in both the murder of the Harvey family and the deaths of Perciel and Mary Tucker. What they don't understand is how or why Ashley ended up dead as well.
Ricky and Ashley loved each other. How did she end up being killed?
Lillian Pauley has helped Richmond police identify Ricky Gray and Ray Dandridge as possible suspects in the murders of both the Harvey family and Perciel and Mary Tucker. But the question remains, how did Ricky's girlfriend, Ashley Baskerville, end up dead? And did the love of Ashley's life end up taking it as well?
When they found her, Brian Harvey's ring was on her neck.
You just had that sense these crimes were connected.
Detectives speak to Lillian's daughter, LaToya, to get some answers. LaToya tells detectives that she and her mother knew the trio was bad news, but she had no idea just how bad.
During the time when they stayed at my house, Ricky, Ray, and Ashley was sitting in the van in the back, and Toya eased up beside the car, and Ashley had a laptop computer. She looked and saw the pictures of the Harvey family on the computer, and Ashley was erasing it.
LaToya had just seen a news piece on the Harvey family and was horrified to think that her childhood friend may have had a hand in such a heinous crime. Luckily, LaToya managed to get away before anyone in the van noticed her.
Toya came in my room and put her hand over my mouth and looked in my eyes, and I've never seen her eyes look like that. She was scared to death, and she said, "Mom, those guys killed the Harvey family." I was petrified because it was all over the TV,
LaToya tells detectives that she and her mother decided to play it cool until they could safely put some distance between themselves and this trio of potentially violent criminals.
I was scared to death, but I had to try to be strong for my daughter. If we had did anything different from the way we did it, we'd have been dead too.
It's just one of them things where you just waiting for the perfect time. You're hoping they'll leave so that you can just call the police.
LaToya was relieved once the trio left. However, she immediately began to fear for Ashley's safety.
We were concerned at that point for her because she was in the car with these two people that done killed their family.
But is Ashley a potential target or an accomplice?
Some women do have a strong need to be needed and to be wanted and desired. So a lot of times, these women are the very ones who end up being manipulated and end up being the victim.
LaToya tells investigators that she and her mother tried to call Ashley over and over, but never got an answer, until a phone call from Ray Dandridge sent the Pauleys in an outright panic.
Ray called Toya on the phone and told Toya that Ashley gone bye-bye. That's what he said. And she said, gone bye-bye. What you mean? He said, she's gone bye-bye. The mama and the daddy gone bye-bye too.
Richmond detectives are now convinced Ricky and Ray are responsible for both the Harvey and Baskerville Tucker murders. But what was Ashley's involvement in the murders? And did she know her parents were a target before she met her own untimely demise? At this point, no one can say for sure.
I think you could speculate that she loved Ricky Gray that much, that she would do anything for him.
Police need to find Ricky and Ray before someone else dies. They do a reverse search on Ray's cell phone number in an effort to track and pinpoint his location.
We believe these two guys are responsible for multiple incidents of multiple victims. So that elevates the caution and the concern. We get the SWAT on call, get them involved right away.
The SWAT team descends upon a home linked to Ray's cell phone. Sitting in the driveway is Perciel Tucker's stolen SUV.
So once they enter the property, there's Ray Dandridge just laid on the floor and followed their commands.
Unfortunately, Ricky Gray is nowhere to be found. Or is he?
At that time, Ray Dandridge was motioning with his eyes while he's laying prone on the floor, rolling his eyes to make the police and detectives aware that that's where Ricky went, without saying it out loud.
And they spot Ricky, who was a big guy, had wedged himself between the wall and hot water heater.
Despite orders to come out with his hands up, Ricky has no plans of going down without a fight.
He's not following their commands. They cannot see if he has a weapon. They cannot see anything below his waist because he's crouched down. They don't know what he's going to do when he comes up. He's desperate, he's cornered, and he knows that this is probably his last chance to make a run for it.
Something violent was going to happen.
Police have just located Ray Dandridge and Ricky Gray, who are both wanted in connection with the murders of two families in Richmond, Virginia. Ray has been arrested without incident, but Ricky isn't giving up.
He's not obeying, telling him to come out, let me see your hands, and he's just not doing it. So the SWAT officer is being more concerned that Ricky Gray is not adhering to their commands.
But then he begins to come out from his hiding spot, and he's got in his hand a power drill.
To avoid incident, officers tackle Ricky.
He never said this to me, but I'm convinced to this day that his hope or his intention was that they would shoot him.
With both men safely in custody, they're transported back to the station for questioning. Detectives speak to Ray Dandridge first. He quickly opens up about both sets of homicides.
Ray Dandridge goes on to tell us about Ashley and the parents being in the house, and then there was a violent struggle.
Dandridge has told me that they did the Baskerville family. They also did responsible for the Harvey family and the kids.
He was unemotional. He was not upset at the least, and he just went through step by step telling us what he did to those people and what his part was. He was telling it so matter-of-factly, you would not believe he was talking about the death and murder of 7 people.
When Ricky Gray finds out Ray Dandridge is talking, he insists on telling his version of events.
He said, well, what is Ray telling you? Is he telling you the truth? I said, well, Ray's telling me the truth according to Ray. I said, but that's all I know. And he said, will you hear my side of the story? And I said, yes, I will.
Ricky confessed to being high on PCP the day of the murders. They all came down from Northern Virginia area with robbery on their mind.
Ricky says the trio drove around in his van on the morning of January 1st with their eyes peeled for potential homes to rob. He says it was then that Ashley offered up the Harvey home as the perfect target.
Ashley Baskerville used to babysit for the Harveys. The reason she didn't babysit anymore was because she had got a possession charge. And when they found out about it, they turned around and terminated her and didn't want her around the kids anymore. She had knowledge of the Harvey family and what they had in their residence.
According to Ricky, Ashley's intimate knowledge of the Harvey home allowed her to lay out the game plan for robbing them.
When they showed up on that street, bingo, there it was. The door was open, Ricky stepped out, checked it, and it was a go.
We come to find out during these statements that Ashley was indeed a lookout. She stayed outside and looked out for the police or anyone else.
Ricky says Ashley had been itching to play a bigger role in the actual crime.
Ashley wanted to be a part of the robbery, but she was told no by Ricky. He said, stay in the car, that's where you belong.
She just was not thinking through her decisions. She wasn't thinking about long-term consequences at all.
Ricky asserts that while Ashley kept watch, Ricky and Ray entered the Harveys' home.
Ricky Gray's confession was just a whole nother level of disturbing. He describes how they talked them into going into the basement. Gray then said he used an extension cord to bind Brian Harvey's hands and feet.
The mother was tied up. They tied the daughters up. I'm sure they were full of fear.
He was very high, and the next thing he knew, things had gone south quickly.
Ricky Gray said, they kept getting up and they was scaring me. I remember seeing the hammer and picking it up. And I don't know who I hit first. I was just hitting them all with the hammer.
So the parents that are not dead yet, they're watching what's happening to their children, and they're watching their family dissolve right in front of their eyes.
Ricky says he and Ray then began covering their tracks, while Ashley continued to keep watch outside.
They tried to set the house on fire, and what that produced was some heavy smoke, but no fire.
Believing the house would soon go up in flames, Ricky says he and Ray quickly swiped anything they could get their hands on.
The total haul was a plate full of cookies, a laptop computer, a wedding band.
A wedding band, which Ricky says he promptly gave to Ashley.
Once that's over and they get in the car and start to drive away, Ashley is now accepting jewelry from Brian Harvey's hand from Ricky.
It was partly kind of like, aha, look what I got from inside, and you can have it. This is our circle of trust, so to speak.
The fact that Ashley was willing to put the ring of one of the murder victims on, it tells me that her relationship dynamics were very off. She just has very different boundaries than what we would typically think of as healthy.
Ricky tells investigators the trio gave the cookies to Lillian Pauley as a hostess gift when they arrived at her home without warning.
I ate some of the cookies. I felt bad when I found out where it came from.
The confessions seemed to solidify Ricky and Ray's involvement in both crimes. Now, detectives have two questions remaining. What led to the murders of Ashley's parents? And why did Ashley, the original mastermind of the Harvey robbery, also have to die?
There's going to be violence in that house. They're not going to let anybody alive.
I can't imagine the panic of knowing that you're going to die a horrible death.
In January of 2006, police have arrested Ricky Gray and Ray Dandridge in connection with the murders of two Richmond families. While a robbery gone wrong led to the brutal slaying of the Harvey family, questions remain about the motivation behind the Baskerville Tucker murders. That is, until Ashley's boyfriend Ricky makes a disturbing admission.
Ricky starts telling us a story about how Ashley was in on this. It took me by surprise for a moment.
According to Ricky, after getting a taste of a life of crime during the Harvey murders, Ashley wanted in on the action so badly, she proposed the three of them rob her parents next.
It sounds like Ashley was very lost and confused about who she could really trust. She wanted what Ricky was offering instead of being willing to receive the support that her parents were willing to give her.
Part of the plan was for her to go in and act like she was being robbed in her parents' home and then play the victim.
She gives them the key to her home and allows herself to be tied up so that it doesn't look like she was involved.
Ricky says that's when the men killed Ashley's parents.
Ricky and Ray secure them and tie them up with plastic and duct tape. They end up beating, bludgeoning, wrapping, suffocating, and stabbing the parents.
I think from the jump, Ashley's idea was something violent was going to happen to her mom and stepfather.
What Ashley didn't know was that Ricky had decided to flip the script.
Ashley seems to realize that they're not untying her. Ricky was talking about how wide-eyed Ashley got when they were not untying her. And the look on her face was one of, I'm going to die.
Ricky, quite frankly, got tired of her and decided to offer right there.
She also had plastic bags placed and secured around her head. It took a few minutes because she was screaming and struggling, but after they started cutting her and subduing her, it didn't take long for her to die.
One can only imagine the amount of fear that she would have had at that time, that something that she thought was going to be a robbery had turned so dramatically wrong.
Ricky says that once Ashley and her parents were dead, he and Ray stole the keys to her stepdad's SUV and fled to Ray's father's house, where they were hiding out until the moment the SWAT team apprehended them.
At the end of our interrogation, I asked Ricky Gray if there was anything else he had to say, and he answered that none of this was necessary. That's probably one of the most truthful statements that he had said to us. None of that was necessary.
That same day, police charged Ricky Gray with 4 counts of capital murder in the Harvey's death, and Ray Dandridge with 3 counts of the same for killing Ashley and her parents.
Prosecutors felt like they had a stronger case against Gray involving the Harveys and likewise involving Dandridge for the Baskerville Tucker family.
8 months later, both men stand trial. Ray Dandridge initially enters a not guilty plea, but after hearing prosecutors lay out the case against him, Ray has a change of heart.
We struck the deal when the Commonwealth rested and Mr. Dandridge had changed his plea to guilty and received a sentence of life without parole.
Ricky, on the other hand, decides to roll the dice with a jury of his peers.
The courtroom was packed. People were outside. It was just unlike anything I'd ever been a part of.
The jury ultimately finds Ricky guilty of capital murder.
It was a quick trial. The issue in the case wasn't who done it. The issue in the case was what's a fair penalty. For us, we felt an obligation to tell the jury how Ricky got to be where he was. You know, what is it that causes a person to break bad this way and commit crimes that are so awful, quite frankly?
He wasn't prone to showing that he was feeling sorry for himself or to crying about what he had done. He realized the gravity of the situation, I think, without doubt.
The judge sentences Ricky Gray to death by lethal injection. And on January 18, 2017, after 10 years on death row, Ricky is executed by the Commonwealth of Virginia.
In all cases, they asked the prisoner if they had any last words, and Ricky kind of just laid there and smirked and said, nope. He was cold until the end.
When he closed his eyes and that man announced him dead, I felt good. I felt real justice, knowing that he's gone.
As for Ashley Baskerville, those closest to her still can't believe that after everything she'd been through, after turning over a new leaf in search of a new life, she threw it all away for a man who claimed to love her, but in reality, played her like a pawn.
Ashley got mixed up with the wrong people and got caught up in something that she couldn't control.
Ashley made some very poor choices that ended up affecting a lot of people, and it's unfortunate.
She loved Ricky Gray that much that she would do anything for him, including having her parents killed.
When you're blinded by love, what does it take to see the light? How much darkness will you tolerate? How much fear are you willing to stomach? Does knowing the man you love is a monster make you one, too?
I don't think Ashley was a monster. I see her as somebody who was in a lot of pain, who probably felt unloved and like she couldn't trust anybody in the world, and that she was willing to accept connection from anybody, even a monster, who would end up killing her.
Ashley believed she was building a future with Ricky Gray, but in the end, she was digging her own grave.